Hey, my name is Maggie. I am a high school English teacher in North Carolina, and this is my channel. Today, I'm going to be continuing my classroom management series that I've been working on, and I wanted to talk about transitions. So transitions to me are a very important part of how I run my classroom, but they also are very important for classroom management. It seems to me that a lot of teachers struggle with transitions, and that's also when students tend to act out. And this is because you're switching between activities or assignments, or you're going from taking notes to independent work or whatever. This is something I thought we could talk about, and I could share with you how I do transitions, and also maybe share some ideas that I know other people do in their classrooms that work for them. The main thing I want to point out, though, is everybody does transitions differently. I would also recommend that once you pick a transition you would like to try, that you try and stick with it for a pretty good while before you change it, because we know that it takes a while for students to acclimate to changes. So stick with it for a while before you say it doesn't work and change to something new, because when you change to that something new, you really are going to be starting over again. The first thing that I do that helps a lot with my transitions is I try to minimize the amount of transitions that are necessary. Now, I know that my honors classes can handle a lot more transitions than my inclusion or academic classes, just because of maturity. So I may have more transitions in my honors classes than I do in my regular classes. This just kind of works out for me. So I would say, notice how your students act when you are transitioning between activities, and determine what you think is too many, and then try to stick with that. So here's what I mean. If you need to take a lot of notes that day, I would maybe try to do, let's say you had 2 sets of notes and you were going to do an activity in between. Well, that's going to require more transitions than if you did all the notes together. Yes, it would be a longer set amount of time, but if your students struggle with transitions, then putting the sets of notes together may help them, because you don't need a transition in between. Also, when I talk about minimizing transitions, another thing I mean is that you have all your stuff ready to go. For instance, if I know we're going to be doing notes, I already have the PowerPoint up, or the Google Slides or whatever we're using up and ready on my computer. So then when it's time for me to use it, I just project it and we're ready to go. There's no downtime. Also, I try to test my technology ahead of time. So if I have a clicker I'm going to be using, I go ahead and have the clicker plugged in at the beginning of class, even if I'm not going to need it until the end. Now, I may not turn it on until then, but it's already plugged in, ready to go. If I know I'm going to need my portable speaker, I already have it set up, ready to go, even if it's not going to play anything for a while. All of these little bitty things take time, and during that time, that's when students are going to act out. So if your transition time is normally 5 minutes because you've got to pull up the PowerPoint, plug in your speaker, plug in your clicker, get it projected, all these things, we're talking about 5 minutes. Whereas if I have all of that taken care of, it takes me seconds. I just hit present, turn my clicker on, done. So think about things like that you can do ahead of time. Another example would be if I know my students are going to do stations, I have the stations already set up, organized, and set in a way that I can distribute them quickly, because that would be another time where students could lose it. I may have the baskets set up in order. I may have things put in baskets. I may have things pre-sorted or pre-counted, like if this group is going to need 5 of these, I already have them in groups of 5. Anything that you can do ahead of time to help with that really does help. So minimizing the amount of time you would use on a transition, and then also minimizing the number of transitions is really, I think, the first step to working on your transitions in general. Another tip that I would say is you could set yourself a timer to kind of see how long your transitions really are. I think sometimes in our head we think that we're doing something quickly, and then you look at the timer and you're like, oh my God, this took 5 minutes of class time. I am terrible with time. So I use timers a ton in my classroom, and they help me a lot with transitions and really with anything else, because I'm not good at knowing how much time it's actually taking to do something. Also, if you get distracted by something else, you may have said we're going to spend 10 minutes on this, but then really you spent 20 because you weren't keeping track of time. Something else I do during transitions with timers is I may say, we are getting ready to start a new activity, which I'm setting it up for the students. And I'm going to say, I'm going to give you 1 minute to talk to your neighbor, or sharpen your pencil, or go get the supplies, or stand up and stretch. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that. And then when the minute is up, we are moving on to the next activity. To me, this still tells the students that you're in charge and that you know what is happening in the room and you are in control. You've told them you're starting a new activity. You've told them how long they have to get ready for it. And you're still allowing them that time to talk very quickly, or to go take care of business like sharpening their pencil or blow their nose or whatever. And it keeps those things from happening during the actual activity you're working on, because you've given them space to do that. That has worked really good for my talkative crazy classes, saying you have 1 minute, kind of, I don't say to be crazy, but what I mean is you have 1 minute to let it all out. Also, if you're doing something that's just really strenuous, like note-taking, it's just life-sucking, it feels like, for students, because they're sitting at the desk, they can't move, they have to pay attention, they're writing quickly, they're listening. Giving them that little break helps a lot, because we know that after they have sat silently for 15 to 30 minutes, they need to talk. So giving them the space to do that helps, because then when we start the next activity, they've already taken care of all of that. But I would say setting the timer is the big integral piece for doing that. If you don't set the timer, then you may lose track of time. Another big thing that I do that helps me with transitions is I make sure that I have a daily agenda or a schedule that I follow to the T every single day. I have it written on the side of my whiteboard for the class, all the way from bell ringer at the beginning to classwork, each thing we're going to do, an exit ticket, and then the homework listed. The other thing that I do is I have Google Slides that I'm using as daily agendas that kids have access to, but I have them projected at the beginning, which tells them everything we're going to do that day, so they are prepared. You also can list supplies that students need for the day to get at the beginning of class, which means instead of having to stop class for 5 minutes so everyone can get a glue stick and a ruler and a pair of scissors, they have taken care of that at the beginning of class, so you don't need that 5-minute transition crazy time where they're all running around getting supplies and things. You've taken care of it at the beginning. So having your stuff prepared and knowing what students need and telling them kind of at the beginning of class can help a lot with that. I've also seen it where people will put, like, you're going to need your textbook today, or your class novel, or your notebook, which means students know they need that at the beginning. So if it happens that they didn't bring it, or they need to go to their locker to get it, or you need to give them one that they can borrow, you can take care of all of that at the beginning of class. And not when you say, okay, everybody turn to page 49, and then you have 3 kids that say, I don't have my textbook, or I don't have my novel, can I borrow one of yours? And then you have to go over there and get it, which then the whole class has to stop and wait, and that's when things get crazy. So take care of any of that kind of business that needs to be taken care of at the very beginning of class. And sometimes I tell students, if they try to come up to me later and say, hey, I don't have my textbook, I'll say, sorry, we took care of that at the beginning of class. You will have to share with a neighbor or whatever. Because they're just going to have to learn that responsibility aspect and that we take care of things during that time. Another thing that can happen where you would need transitions is like if you're doing stations. So kids are only staying at one group for a certain set amount of time, and then they're moving to another group. We know that this can be a crazy time because kids may not know the right direction to go. They may not be finished with this one before you ask them to move. Any number of things. They slap their neighbor when they walk by. So what I do is, before we do an activity like stations or a game that has a lot of kind of rules and procedures that go with it, I go over them. And I also have it projected on my board so that students can follow along with me. So for instance, for doing stations, I may say you're going to have 5 minutes at each station. The directions are at the stations. I'm going to ring my bell. So I have a wireless doorbell that I push that I got from Amazon. I push that button, let them hear the ding-dong sound that it makes. I'll say whenever you hear that sound, that means the 5 minutes are up and you need to move in this direction. So I will literally say, and this group will go here, and this group will go here, and this group will... And it takes a little bit of time for me to go through that, but they need it. They need it. And guess what? Every time we do stations, I go over it again. They need to hear it. They need to hear the procedures at the beginning. And then I'll say, as soon as you get to your new station, have a seat and get started. Another thing I do is on those slides that are up at the front of the class, since they're Google Slides, I can insert a YouTube video. And so I just use YouTube's timers, which if you just Google 5-minute timer, 10-minute timer, 1-minute timer, plenty of videos will come up with like visuals and stuff on it. So you can project that. So students also have a visual reminder of, well, we're getting to 1 minute, so we're getting ready to switch. And that helps them also because like for me, I think about like sometimes I ring the bell and somebody will be like, oh my God, I'm not done yet. Well, if they can see on the board like there's 1 minute left, they know it's time to kind of wrap it up. And that helps a little bit with their frustration in having to move stations. I also don't give them a ton of time to move stations, and that may sound kind of mean, but it does not take a lot of time for you to pick up your things and go to the next set of desks over, sit down and get started. So pretty much when the bell rings, I restart the timer, saying, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to kind of get in your seat and get settled. No, they're going to get wild and crazy and they're going to start roaming all over the place. So my suggestion would be, if you're doing stations, I would go ahead and say, I'm starting the timer now. For whatever reason, the timer, especially for high schoolers, they're like, oh, they feel like they've got to get on it. So that would be kind of my suggestion for that. Another time that's really hard for transitions besides in between activities and like the beginning of class is the end of class. So I do exit tickets at the end of my class, which kind of takes up the last 5 minutes. So I try to really keep an eye on the time for every single class when we get to the last 5 minutes. So class ends at 9:50. At 9:45, I'm going to make an announcement to everyone. And I'm going to say, okay, there are 5 minutes left of class. You need to, and then I list all the things they need to do. You need to clean up your station. You need to put back all the supplies that you borrowed. You need to check the floor for markers and trash, depending on kind of like what we've done that day. You need to clean up your flexible seating area if you sat in one of them. You need to put your textbooks back on the shelf, and then you need to complete the exit ticket. And I had them just do it on sticky notes and stick it by the door. I also, as I've said before, will project that list onto the screen for the last 5 minutes and then have the exit ticket really big. This helps with a lot of things. It helps us transition into time to leave, which means they also know if they've got any questions they need to ask me for homework or something, this is kind of the time to do it. My room gets cleaned up because I'm giving them the time to actually clean. Whereas if the bell rings and all their stuff is out, they just go, I gotta go to class. And they don't clean up their mess. So giving them that time to clean up helps. And then they have the time to do the exit ticket. And they know once they've taken care of all that stuff, they need to be in their seat kind of chilling until the bell rings. The good thing is all of the stuff that I've just listed takes about 5 minutes. So I'm really helping with that transition time between class. So then when the bell rings and they all leave the room, my room is clean and ready for the next group. And it's great. It also gives me time to tell them anything I need to tell them, like homework for the next day as a reminder, which again is projected on the screen. So that's something else you can look at doing. I think people freak out about exit tickets being really complicated, and it's literally every day me either asking them one of two things. A self-assessment thing or like a formative assessment thing. So I may say something like, what was the theme of chapter 3? Because we read chapter 3 that day. They're just writing the sentence and their name. Done. Or I may say, since we took notes on theme today and did an activity, tell me your level of understanding that you're at between 0 to 4 for theme. They're just writing a number in their name. It's super quick, has them thinking, and then I get to look at them and see, are we really where I think we're at for this activity or the notes we did or for theme or whatever. Another thing that can happen during transitions is you need to get everybody's attention. And I will say, I'm probably the worst at this because my attention getter is, all right, or okay, y'all, or everybody, or whatever, and they're not always listening. So one thing that you can do is if you have one of those doorbells, you can ring that. There is one of the teachers at our school who does a great job with this, and what he does is he counts. So he goes 3, 2, 1, and then he says whatever he needs to say. And the kids know once he starts counting and when he snaps, he's getting ready to talk and there's no talking. So you need to figure out something that works for you. You may think that both of the things I just suggested are very elementary, but they work. And you, as much silly as you feel, once you lose your voice from trying to get your students' attention or when they talk over top of you constantly, you will find out that you need some way to get their attention. And then also you need to be consistent with whatever you choose. If you're going to do the counting and the snap, you need to do it every single time. If you're going to use the doorbell, you need to use it every single time. So that's kind of my ideas on transitions. Is there another time you can think of where you really need to work on transitions or where your kids struggle with transitions? If you do, then let me know down in the comments and I can tell you kind of what I think. What are some things that you use as attention getters or in between transitions to make it easy for your students and for you? I hope that you're subscribed. It is 2020. It's a brand new year. And my goal is, I've been struggling to get videos up every week. So I'm trying to get back in the swing of things, say that I have to upload 3 videos a month to start off with. And maybe I can get back into it and get on every week. I'm kind of falling off here. So if you have any ideas for videos, you can always message me here on Instagram. And I like to hear from you guys and I like to see what you like to see. So let me know. And I'll see you next time. Bye.